Hey everyone, it's me, Grant the Movie and TV Guy. Welcome to a special Raise of Popcorn with Grant. So, here's the deal. You're gonna see the title of this and you're gonna be like, wait a minute, Grant, it's March. And didn't you already post your best of list at the end of December of last year? Yes, I did. And didn't you post your runners up? I did. But here's the thing. I felt like this year, my top 25 movies were not enough. So I made a separate list from the runners-up of the honorable mentions, aka the next 18, which were kind of the movies, some of which are also movies that probably would have made the list if I saw them before I posted the list. Because there are some movies I saw on New Year's weekend. There's also ones like one on this list that I saw recently, where I was like, okay, maybe I should. So just to recap the list so far, and then we'll do the final honorable mentions of 2021. And if you're wondering, where's that film? Guys, there were so many great movies in 2021. There were some that I honestly felt tempted to do an honorable mentions to the honorable mentions to the honorable mentions to the best of list, because there's so many movies. So just to recap the main list, the top 25 movies of the year, one of which is a tie, so there's actually 26 films on here. Just real quickly to recap. Number 25, The Beatles Get Back, directed by Peter Jackson. 24, In the Heights, directed by John M. Chu. 23, a tie between The Sparks Brothers, directed by Edgar Wright, and Annette, directed by Leos Carax. Number 22, Tick, Tick, Boom, directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Number 21, Last Night in Soho, also directed by Edgar Wright. Number 20, Nightmare Alley, directed by Guillermo del Toro. Number 19, The Power of the Dog, directed by Jane Campion. Number 18, The Last Duel, directed by Ridley Scott. Number 17, Shiva Baby, directed by Emma Seligman. Number 16, Nobody, directed by Elia Nashuler. Number 15, Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, directed by Josh Greenbaum. Number 14, Minari, directed by Lee Isaac Chung. Number 13, The Father, directed by Florian Zeller. Number 12, The Mitchells versus the Machines. And real quick, I just want to make sure I get these two guys' names right, because I screwed up last time. It's hard with animation because there's usually multiple directors. Okay. Come on. So yeah, number 12, The Mitchells vs. the Machines, directed by Mike Rianda and co-directed by Jeff Rowe. There we go. Got it this time. Number 11, Saint Maud, directed by Rose Glass. Yeah. Saint Maud. Sorry, got thrown off there for a second. My mistake. Number 10, Supernova, directed by Harry McQueen. And Supernova as in Sweet Little Romance with Stanley Tucci, not Supernova, that terrible 2000 sci-fi film with the worst trailer ever starring Peter Facinelli. Also called Supernova. Number 9, Pig, directed by Michael Sarnowski. Number 8, Scenes from a Marriage, directed by Haggai Levy. Number 7, Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised, directed by Amir Questlove Thompson. Number 6, West Side Story, directed by Steven Spielberg. Number 5, Belfast, directed by Kenneth Branagh. Number 4, Come On, Come On, directed by Mike Mills. Number 3, Nomadland, directed by Chloe Zhao. Number 2, Licorice Pizza, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, and my number 1 film of 2021, 9 Days, directed by Edson Oda. So that is my top 25. Now on to the honorable mentions. I'm just going to give you a quick log line, tell you what I thought, and we'll get the hell out of here, because the thing is, I have over 300 videos. You're not going to have time to watch all of them. So, my honorable mentions for 2021, aka honorable mention / the movies that Grant got to late and thinks are great and probably would have ended up on the list. And all of these could have been on the list. So, first honorable mention, there is, I believe, 18 honorable mentions. Like I said, it was a great year this year. I saw 210 movies in 2021, so there you go. Alright, so honorable mentions are, first honorable mention, Judas and the Black Messiah. This was directed by Shaka King. I'm going in release order, by the way. Judas and the Black Messiah, directed by Shaka King. This was a really powerful film about the chairman, Fred Hampton, of the Illinois Black Panther Party, and his betrayal and eventually set up for his own assassination by a person he thought was his friend, who was an undercover FBI agent. It shows these two men and how they get to know each other, and the betrayal that will change everything. It's a powerful story of friendship and lingering guilt. Judas and the Black Messiah is excellent. Next honorable mention is a film that not enough people saw, that has an Oscar nominee and the current star of the third highest grossing film of all time, Benedict Cumberbatch, and that is The Courier. This was directed by Dominic Cooke. This was a perfect sort of English sort of flip side to Spielberg's Bridge of Spies, of where Benedict Cumberbatch plays a salesman who's sort of recruited during the Cold War, to kind of team up with a Russian counter-operative to basically play the part like I'm going as a businessman. And in the process, they avert the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's about these two men who were kind of instrumental in averting the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's a powerful story of friendship and mutual respect among people whose countries are at war. And if it wasn't relevant early last year when it came out, it certainly is now. So, The Courier. Dominic Cooke. Directed by Dominic Cooke. Alright, next film is another little film that not enough people saw, and that was Together. This was directed by Nicole Beckwith, and is a really powerful comedy drama, very funny, and very moving, that takes rom-com tropes in the story of platonic love, friendship, between Patty Harrison, who is a superstar, and Ed Helms, and it's about he is this older man old middle-aged man, who wants to raise a child on his own. He's kind of not had a lot of luck in love. He wants to raise a child on his own. He hires this young woman, played by Patty Harrison, to be his surrogate, and it's about the friendship that formed, the undeniable bond that kind of forms between the two of them during the 9 months of her pregnancy with his child. It's a powerful film, it's very funny, and it leads to one of the most moving endings of last year. So that's Together, directed by Nicole Beckwith. Next is a film that aired on MTV and deserved a bigger rollout and is also super underrated, and that is Pink Skies Ahead. This was directed by Kelly Oxford, Canadian director, and it features Jessica Barden, who was on The End of the Effing World. She was also recently, as of this weekend, on Pieces of Her, which I'm halfway through. It's pretty good so far. And it's about anxiety. It's about this young woman who drops out of school and suffers from social anxiety. So basically the female version of me. And it's sort of about how she has to kind of deal with her emotional state, but it has almost that Juno quality of it tackles serious issues in a way that's still very funny and very real. I really dug Pink Skies Ahead, and Jessica Barden, like, what a star. Pink Skies Ahead, it's, I believe, on Paramount Plus, maybe now? I think so, go check it out. Directed by Kelly Oxford. Next film is a blockbuster, weirdly enough, and it's one of the best sequels to one of the best horror films of recent years, studio horror films, and that is A Quiet Place Part 2. This was directed by John Krasinski, and I really had to fight to keep this off the list. I loved A Quiet Place Part 2, and what I loved about it is that I thought when I heard they were going to make a sequel to Quiet Place is so good, because it's so stripped out and so simple, and it's so self-contained, but at the same time, I was kind of giddy about it because as John Krasinski was coming back and he had full creative control, which can also be a detriment. But in this case, it was the right call because John Krasinski, man, Jim Halpert knows how to shoot a movie. I mean, that opening scene is just an all-time great. We might have to take like a brief break and come back. We might have to do a long video. So, Quiet Place Part 2, awesome. Or I could just blow through these. So, I have about 5 minutes left on my clock for a single video, so, alright. Quiet Place Part 2 is the next one. It's directed by John Krasinski. Next film is an experimental art film that was released on Netflix under the guise of being a stand-up comedy special. and that is Bo Burnham Inside. This was directed by Bo Burnham, and oh my god, I had to fight to keep this off. This is one of the hardest ones I had to pull off. This film is probably the best. This and the recent Soderbergh film Kimi are probably the two best things that. And Together by Stephen Daldry are probably the three best projects that could possibly come out of quarantine. And this and Folklore by Taylor Swift might actually be the best ones. Not a lot to say. It's just it builds and it just hits a real powerful note. It's funny like Bo Burnham's comedy always is, but there's that undercurrent of melancholy that's even more pronounced here, and you will not be able to get Welcome to the Internet out of your head or any of the songs. So yeah, Bo Burnham Inside. I've seen it multiple times. Our next film is one of the craziest comedies I have seen in a long time, and that is Zola. This was directed by Janixa Bravo, and it is it's based on a Twitter thread. It's Riley Keough, and she is, it's Riley Keough and Taylor Page, I believe her name is, and they're strippers. The premise of the movie is, Riley Keough asks Zola, played by Taylor Page, to go on this road trip, and what she doesn't realize is that she said, we're just going to go to a club and dance. They're not just going to go to a club and dance, and it keeps escalating. And it eventually leads to the dissolution of the friendship between these two women. I love this film's style. I loved its writing. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was frightening at times, uncomfortable at times. It's a true dark comedy with one of the funniest endings of the year. Zola. Don't forget it. It's not for everyone. It's definitely not for kids, but it's excellent. How this movie got even an R, I don't know. It's great. Next film. The Green Knight. This was directed by David Lowery, one of my favorite directors. And as someone who usually balks at high fantasy, I love The Green Knight, man. I thought this movie was great. I'd get it if I could. I bought it on Blu-ray. I'm really tempted to get the tabletop game. It's awesome. And Dev Patel is awesome, and he's redeemed himself for The Last Airbender between this and David Copperfield. So yeah. Next film is a Best Picture nominee, and that is Coda. This was directed by Cian or Xian. I don't know how to pronounce it. Header. And this is a remake of a French language film that was actually pretty controversial because it cast non-deaf actors to play the parts. Luckily, they've redeemed that here. The actors who are playing deaf characters are actually deaf. It's Marley Matlin, Troy Kotzer, who's nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and what a performance. And Daniel Durant. All of them are terrific. The star of this movie, though, to me, is Emilia Jones. She is excellent in this film. It's a film that is a formula movie, but it's so touching and so funny and so real that you don't really care about the formula. It's just a really uplifting story, and the emotional climax. I will not be able to listen to both sides now as easily without thinking about this movie. So, there you go. You'll know why when you see it. The next one is the craziest movie I've seen maybe ever, and that is Titan. This is directed by Julia Ducournau, who did the terrific French horror film Raw. This is also a French film, French language, about a woman who has sex with a car and has a car baby, but it turns out it's... yeah, I'm not kidding. But it turns out it's so much more than that. It's weirdly about gender, and it's about relationships between children and their parents, fathers and sons, and all that stuff. And it's also one of the hardest movies to watch. It's grotesque, it's gory, it's disturbing. And kind of moving and touching and funny and weird. I don't know how to describe it. Some movies are hard to describe. This is one of them. But Titan, excellent. We're going to have to take a little break. And we will come back for the rest of this video, well, right after this. See you then. Bye. Welcome back. So, just running real quick. We will just run through... actually, I'm combining these videos so I don't have to run through it. So we'll just pick it up from where I left. So the next film is the film that if I saw it a day earlier. I saw this movie the day after I posted this list. It was like, I believe... No, it was actually New Year's Eve. Because it was available to rent on New Year's Eve. This film. If this film, I'd watched it even a day sooner, this would have been on my best of list. I'm serious. And that film is a movie that I have no love. No acting love, nothing. One of the best acted, best written movies I've seen so far this decade, and that is Mass. You've probably never heard of this. Mass is directed by Fran Kranz. He actually was the stoner in one of my favorite horror films, The Cabin in the Woods. This is his writing and directing debut. He's not in the film, but he wrote and directed it. and it is as stripped down as movies get, but it really hits hard. It's these fine characters. It's Martha Plimpton, Reed Birney, Jason Isaacs, and Ann Dowd. So it's 4 great character actors, and it's the whole movie is basically these people, and they're in like a church rec room. The whole movie, it's 2 hours. It's riveting. It's all dialogue. They're in this rec room, and essentially, they begin to talk about a tragedy that occurred. Both their sons respectively, have died. We soon find out that Martha Plimpton and Jason Isaacs are the parents of a boy who was killed in a school shooting. And Ann Dowd and Reed Birney are the parents of the boy who perpetrated the shooting. And they're having this conversation a couple of years after to essentially make peace with one another and make peace with their collective loss. And it's this beautifully written, basically stage play, because you don't really leave that room. There's no flashbacks to the shooting. They don't do any of that stuff. But it's so well handled, and it could have so easily went wrong with that subject matter, and it could have really went into too much speechifying, or it could have gotten really, or could have become exploitative, and it never does, because his screenplay is so good, and within that cramped space, his filmmaking is so dynamic that you are just riveted. There is a line, one of the most shattering lines I've heard in a movie, where Martha Plimpton looks at Ann Dowd, and they speak, and he goes, talks about, my son, and he goes, tell me about him. He goes, what do you want to know? She goes, everything. Why? Why do you want to know about my son? She's like, why do I want to know? Because he killed mine. It's so simple, but it really hits hard. Great movie, Mass. Again, if I saw it a day sooner, it would have made my list, but it is number 26. Let's just call it that. Our next film is a film that I've gotten a lot of crap for not putting on the final list, and it was close. I love this film. I saw it twice in the theaters, but I gotta follow my heart a little bit, and it just barely missed. And that is, but it's still a movie I gave 5 stars to, and a lot of that is because it was only half of a larger 2-part film. And I feel like that was kind of the thing to push it over. You know what it is? Dune. Dune, directed by Denis Villeneuve. I love Denis Villeneuve. I love this film, and I never read the book. The only exposure I have to Dune is the David Lynch film, so I really didn't know this movie until it, was gaining ground. It's excellent. It is awesome. It is exactly what popcorn movies should do. They take you to another world. They make you feel like it's lived in. There's emotional stakes. There's humor. There's incredible action. There's incredible cinematography. It's big budget filmmaking done excellently. And with real... Someone said it's like the perfect guess between a popcorn movie and an art house film. It is. It in the same way that Blade Runner 2049 is, I actually like that film a little more from Denis. But that's not a big thing. Blade Runner 2049 is one of my favorite films of the last decade. Point I'm trying to make is, I love this film. So go see, if you haven't seen Dune, what are you waiting for? Go see it. Next film, speaking of Timothée Chalamet, next film is a film I feel like I loved more than even a lot of fans of this director, and that is The French Dispatch, or the longer title, which I prefer to call it, The French Dispatch of the Liberty, Kansas Evening Sun. This was directed by Wes Anderson, one of my favorite directors, and it's one of those movies that it's an anthology, and yes, some stories kind of work better than others, but I think that really makes the movie work is it's a tribute to journalism and what journalism can do. The main character, everyone's kind of like, oh, well, who's the main character? The main character is the Bill Murray character, the editor of this paper, because essentially it's sort of a eulogy to that kind of print writing. It's kind of, and that prose. It's kind of taking that in this kind of triptych of Wes Anderson quirkiness, and it's kind of painting this picture of the morning of information and why we should respect journalists. That's really what the film is about. And I loved it. I thought it was just magical. Like Wes Anderson can do, the changing of color schemes, black and white. Little things like an edit when Benicio del Toro says something to Adrian Brody that he doesn't like, and he just lets out this kind of random scream that gets cut. There's certain little editing choices that I love. little quirky line where he's like Frances McDormand coming in while Timothy Chalamet is in the bath, and he goes, I'm naked, Mrs. Cremens. He goes, yes, I see. It's like there's that Wes Anderson kind of humor that I love. So yeah, French Dispatch is excellent. You should check it out. It's on HBO Max as of last week, actually. So go check that out. Next film has gotten a very deserved Best Actress frontrunner, and this is another one that was really close to the list, and that is Spencer. This was directed by Pablo Larraín. It's sort of a spiritual sequel in a lot of ways to his earlier film about Jackie Kennedy Onassis called Jackie with Natalie Portman. Kristen Stewart plays Diana, Princess of Wales, Princess Di. And the reason it's called Spencer is that is her name originally, Diane Spencer, and it's Diana Spencer, and it's basically a fictionalized account of a Christmas weekend that she spends with the royal family that ultimately turns the tide in her leaving Prince Charles. And it's sort of the psychology and basically looking into the mind of Diana and what she must have been going through. And Kristen Stewart, it's basically a psychological horror film in fancy dress, which I loved about it. Kristen Stewart is just sublime in this movie. She just the dinner scene, the scene with the pearls in the pea soup. That's all I'll say. Where she's just eating the pearls, which you almost don't know if it's a dream sequence or if it's real. Like there's this weird, it's such a kind of a nightmarish quality of the filmmaking here. I loved it. Let's put it this way: it's no surprise to me that Pablo Larraín is a student of Darren Aronofsky because it has that level of discomfort at points. I love this film. Go check out Spencer. Next film is Best Picture nominee. It's another example of a formula movie where it's so well acted and so well done that the formula ceases to matter, and that is King Richard. This is directed by Ronaldo Marcus Green, who also did the film this year, Joe Bell. I did not see Joe Bell. Heard it wasn't great, but King Richard is. King Richard. It stars Will Smith, who has gotten a Best Actor nomination, as has Anjanou Ellis, who is also terrific as... And it's basically the story of Venus and Serena Williams told from the point of view of their father, Richard. And it's this really great story about how he kind of pushed them. He had a plan for them from the beginning to kind of make their dreams happen. And it's really uplifting film. Not much to say about it, but it's really uplifting. Next film. We don't talk about Bruno, no. First rule of Fight Club. We don't talk about Bruno, no. Encanto. Which is... Honestly, I was kind of... There was sort of a dance between this and Raya because I loved them both. This has been a pretty solid year for Disney movies overall. Mostly. I'm looking at you, Home Sweet Home Alone. You rotten to the core little bastard of a movie. But it's directed. Who directed it, Grant? Focus. By Jared Bush and Byron Howard, and is co-directed by Charisse Castro-Smith. And just... a magical looking film, a magically put together film. I loved it. It's just beautiful. Just beautiful and funny. There's great songs. And for once it's a Disney heroine who doesn't fit the typical standard Disney heroine sort of role, which I appreciated. So yeah. Our next film is a film I saw a few weeks ago, and oh my god, if this movie... This actually might actually tie for number one for 9 days if I were to revise this, to be honest with you. Our next film is also nominated for Best Picture. It's also nominated for Best Foreign Language Film, and it's a film that I really loved. It's a film that I feel like through no fault of my own, became sort of a footnote at the end of the year for me because I saw it in February. But I don't want to take away from that, so I'm putting it here. Drive My Car. This film is directed by Ryosuke Hamaguchi, and I'm telling you something, it's still in theaters, it's also on HBO Max. This movie is 3 hours long, but you will be so enriched by it. It is just this beautiful film, and it's weird, and it's magical, and it's quiet, and it's poetic, and it's excellent, and just so specific in how it deals with grief. It's so real, and I recently have gone through my own personal grief. I've lost someone I'm very close with, and this film kind of helped me in a weird sort of way. Drive My Car is beautiful. Go see Drive My Car. And the last but not least, the biggest film of the year. And you know what? It earns it. It's pizza time! Give me a rent, Parker. You'll get your rent when you fix this damn door. That's right. Spider-Man No Way Home. This was directed by John Watts. And as a child of the early 2000s and late 1990s, this movie was like the biggest, chocolatiest, most sprinkled, most peanut butter creamed ice cream sundae of awesome-tacularness. Like, I loved Spider-Man No Way Home. It is probably the best third installment in a series, like, ever. Like, it's really good, and just solidifies how great Tom Holland is. So anyway, that's it. We are finally, I know I keep saying this, we are finally now closing the book on the year. And in June, at the end of June, we'll have the midterm report for the year, the best and worst films of 2022 so far. But until then, until we meet again, I'm Grant, the movie and TV guy. I see it all. And I'm happy to share it with you. I love you all. I appreciate you all. Find me on all the things. And we're all raising popcorn. Make mine with extra butter. And damn, was last year great. And I will see you next time.